really makes my life a lot easier when I don't have to come in and worry about what's happening to these events. So really grateful for that. Yeah, just a couple more things. So bathrooms right out the door where you guys came in. If you have to get up at any time, feel free. You're not going to interrupt anything. Obviously, there's a ton of food, so feel free to get up and get seconds. And yeah, for those who haven't been to a Worksighted Next event, these are usually quarterly events we put on, and we really just try to focus on picking topics that we think business decision makers and IT decision makers need to know to help move their business to the next level. Pretty simply put, we put on these events. We also have monthly webinars. You might notice some of our employees who are in those webinars every month. So yeah, feel free to check those out. We'll obviously be sending you all that info when those things come up. A couple more things. We do have a number that you can text at now or at any time during the presentation or the panel with any of your questions. So text the 616 number up here on the screen. Becca's going to get all these questions, put them together, and at the end we'll give them to the panelists to actually answer. With that being said, I think that covers everything. So let me give a quick intro and invite our CEO and co-founder, Mike Harris, up here to moderate the panel.
How y'all doing? Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, this thing works. Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate everyone coming out today. I'm really excited about this. We've got a great group of panelists and they're going to share some really important information with us about security. So the focus of this event is really one where it's important that as we talk today, you understand security, there isn't one solution to security. It's not one tool, one policy, one contract, any of these things, right? It's all of those things, but it's also important that we start thinking as organizations and as leaders about how do we start to build a mind shift to our organizations, and how do we start to think culturally about making security really, really important within our organizations. Think a little bit about innovation, right? So companies talk a lot about being innovative companies, and you can buy whatever software programs you want, you can read all the books on innovation that you want, but if you don't build it into your culture, your company will not be innovative. Security is much the same way. We believe that for y'all to stay in front of the trends that are coming in security, we have to be proactive. And to be proactive, we have to build it into our culture. So that cultural aspect is something I really want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we're listening to the panelists today who are specialists in multiple different areas across the security spectrum. So with that being said, I want to welcome our panelists to come forward and let them introduce themselves when they get settled.
Can you hear me? All right. My name is Dr. Jared Dumont. I am the founder and CEO of VDA Labs, stands for Vulnerability Discovery and Analysis. And we do all things cyber, so blue team engineering, defense, SIM tuning, any kind of security engineering for enterprises, as well as for makers. So we do a lot of code security, developer training, SDLC, fuzzing, static analysis, CI/CD, anything kind of in the builder, maker sort of space, and then incident response, ethical hacking, those kind of fun things as well. We also do training if you're interested in any sort of pen test, incident response, any of that kind of ethical hacking training. We do some federal work as well, which is really interesting stuff that we're involved in. So
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Jason Crowe. I'm a cybersecurity and privacy attorney here at Miller Johnson in town. You can see our banner over there. You can see the sign from 131 pretty well as you're going down or heading south or heading north. So we were actually just sitting at the table earlier, and Jared here said, "What does a cybersecurity attorney do?" He's like, "I know what I do when there's a data breach. I know what I do in cybersecurity, but what does an attorney do?" And I thought that was a good question, and I get it all the time. What we do is we work with organizations, medium, small size, all the way up to billion-dollar companies, and we really help them mitigate cybersecurity risk, right? So it's going in, and to Mike's point on creating a culture, we go in and we try to take a holistic approach with our clients, and we say, okay, how can, if a cybersecurity event is going to happen, and it will, and it probably already has in your organization, how do we mitigate risk and how do we mitigate losses with respect to that? And so we start with policies and procedures. And we draft them to be a living document and a living policy within the organization, as well as being compliant with the law, right? So now privacy law is actually a thing. And there's real laws out there that have real consequences and real fines and real compliance issues. And the Indiana Attorney General is really good at letting my clients know about those things. So Indiana's stepped up enforcement. Mark Radonis here is with me. He's an associate. Sarah W., I can't pronounce her last name very well, is here with me as well. They work with me to help respond to government inquiries about what my clients are doing or not doing with respect to cybersecurity. So we start with the policies and procedures, the holistic approach. We help clients respond to government regulation. We help them comply. And then in the end, we try to wrap that up in insurance and placing the right type of insurance. So we kind of work across that spectrum. And then when there's an incident, I'm the C-suite quarterback. I'm the person who's translating for the C-suite what Jared and his team are finding out in the trenches on the network. They're looking at the ransomware. They're looking at the what's happened in the email logs. They're telling me that, and then I'm telling the C-suite what it means in terms of compliance obligations, contract obligations, and then I'm also telling the government what they need to know, and I'm also letting affected persons know what they need to know. So we kind of do it all, and it's our hair's on fire a lot of times. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Paul Duckworth, and I'm here with Twisting. And my role at Twisting is Director of Embedded Vision and AI. So my primary role at Twisting is business development. So my secondary role is IT Director. And so in that sense, I represent a company that's running very lean with IT. So my primary role is to help us grow our business. And just a little background on our business. We really help companies transform digitally. There's a lot of digital movement, and the way we do that is through the development of end-to-end IoT systems. And we have skills in human-centered design, embedded electronics and software, as well as business strategy. So ultimately, we're helping businesses use IoT to help grow new value for their businesses. And I think the thing to just think about relative to this conversation, ultimately what we produce for our clients is intellectual property. So the accessibility and the security of that data is of paramount importance. If that data gets breached, our jobs are on the line in a big way. So that's a quick flyby on Twisting. So I guess the other thing is just, I'm here as a learner and an applier of everything these smart people are telling me, right? And Worksighted has been a huge help in that as well, because I have to leverage other resources to create the right strategies and the right kind of methods to keep our business secure.
Thanks, Paul.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline. I am a partner manager at Duo Security. So I support all of our MSPs and partners, get them onboarded, signed up, and Duo Security does MFA or 2FA if you guys haven't heard of us before, but we help companies prevent credential theft, which is extremely important now in today's security landscape. So yeah, before that I was also working with partners at AlienVault, a little bit of a different technology. Of course they do SIM, but I can definitely speak to working with partners and the security landscape as a whole, and zero trust as well. So yeah, I'm excited to be here from Austin, Texas. So if my y'all comes out here and there, I'm sorry. But yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for the intros. Excited to have all of you, and everyone brings a little bit of a different perspective to the conversation, different background, different disciplines. So the first question I want to start off with, I'm going to direct it at Jared to start, is can you talk a little bit about how you see the security landscape shifting and how it's different today than it was in the even not so distant past?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of things that are changing, both for the good and the bad, right? So there's a lot of technologies that are new, that are great, that if you apply correctly, there's things that we'll talk about today, maybe zero trust, single sign-on, two-factor. There's all different kinds of things that are out and available now that work quite well, and if you're applying correctly, that can be great. Likewise, I think there's more tools on the software engineering side, different types of, for example, novel API, RESTful, security analysis tools, and there's all kinds of things that can be done both on the human, the design, the engineering, and the enterprise or IT infrastructure things to make things better. One thing that's not as good, so those are all the good things. One thing that's not as great is that it's all moving faster. There's more of everything in terms of technology, and so the ones that aren't doing anything are getting left behind, right? So if you're not doing anything 10 years ago, you could probably get by, maybe even skate. If you're not doing anything now, you're in trouble, I would say. And so security is kind of just ramping up, I would say, in terms of importance.
One more piece to that before I'm going to ask Carolyn to answer that question next. What about on the threat side, Jared? How do you see on the threat side? How are you seeing things evolve now from the not so distant past?
I would say the threat side continues to be pretty consistent, right? So again, where there were, whether it's buffer overflows or ransomware attacks or social engineering or business email compromise, all the kind of things that we saw, I think we still see all those. There's just more of it all the time, and I think attackers continue to pivot where before maybe they were going after a big bank or something like that because they were kind of looking for a bigger payday. Now I think we see a lot of attackers shifting, going towards small companies, schools, churches, you name it, because they're softer targets and they can kind of hit these at scale relative to these sort of mass campaigns of whether it's some kind of, send me an Apple card scam or a ransomware scam, or there's so many different types that are out there. I think we see a lot more threats than we did before. So I guess long story short, it hasn't changed in the sense that, we're not really necessarily more or less vulnerable. Again, we have new technologies that help a lot, but we also have a lot more of those attacks that kind of keeps going out too.
Okay. Carolyn, you mind adding to that?
Yeah, I think companies are now much more agile than they were before. And what that means is things are shifting from being on-prem, right? So we have cloud applications, we have remote employees, contractors that can access applications from anywhere in the world from their mobile devices, and most of the time they're using personal devices. So we have a broader attack surface now, so we have to focus on protecting that access control and enforcing zero trust. So being consistent in that end user experience, but not trusting anyone just because we know who they are.
Jason, do you mind, from the legal side and the things you're seeing, how are you seeing the landscape different today than the not so distant past?
Well, business is booming at Miller Johnson because of all the new laws, right? So if you're a company in here and you collect California resident personal information, you may have heard of the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. You may have heard of the Nevada Privacy Act. You may have heard of Colorado's Privacy Act. You may have heard of the Illinois Biometric Privacy Act. All of these things, all of these laws, they all tend to look the same now, but they weren't here 3-4 years ago. I actually came to Miller Johnson 5 years ago, started the practice group about a year in, based on my experience dealing with data breach response in my prior life in Boston as an attorney. And at the time, crowds like this didn't exist. We would hold an event like this and they wouldn't show up. But now, with all these new laws and all these new regulations, and in fact, new enforcement. So as I was alluding to earlier, it used to be I would feel a subpoena on behalf of one of my clients for the a request for documents. Now I'm getting a request for information from an attorney general related to a consumer complaint about how a company handled the personal information that they provided the company. And so it's just as easy as, okay, I've got a consumer complaint, I'm gonna go to the AG's office website, I'm gonna log on, submit my complaint, that's gonna generate a form letter, that form letter comes to your company and it's going to cost you $10,000, $15,000 to respond to it. And so we're just seeing a lot more of that from the legal perspective.
Awesome, thank you. So let's talk for a minute about things we're actually seeing happen in our region, right? So Jared, can you speak to some cases or things you've dealt with maybe? Obviously we don't need to know who, and we don't want to know who, but can you give some examples of real world things you've had to deal with for companies right here in our region?
For sure, yeah, we do a lot of, what we call kind of reactive security, right? Incident response handling, forensics, threat analysis, threat hunting, all those kind of things are more kind of what you're asking, like when something happens, what do you see? And we try to do a lot more proactive security. We prefer to do that, right, where people have us, look at their code or their mobile app or their car or their network or whatever it is before, so that that doesn't happen. That's
Sure.
kind of the preferable idea, is to do some security, kind of in advance. But you're right, one way or the other, you need to be prepared for the worst case because it does happen. I would say, probably the number one threat we're still seeing is BEC, business email compromise, where they get into an account, and that can happen a lot of different ways. A lot of times it's, maybe that people are not using 2FA or they're not using a good password manager or something like that. So they're, using the same old password that they used on their Yahoo account, that whole thing got breached 10 years ago for their work email or something like that. So attacker gets into the controller's email, they watch conversation for a month or something to see what's going on, and they realize, oh, every month the CEO asks the controller for, to change the wire transfer to so-and-so for the benefits payment or whatever, and at just the right time they inject themselves so the money goes to some account overseas or whatever. That kind of situation, and that could play out in 100 different ways, but something like that, some kind of, fraudulent money laundering and transfer situation is really big. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of ransomware. That's another type of attack. Still seeing that a lot. Again, that could take place in a lot of different ways. It could be your data, it could be patient health record, it could be, just somebody's reputation, but, kind of holding somebody ransom somehow, either based on data that you locked up, or data that you stole, or, sensitive data that that you're threatening to expose, those type of things. And then we still see all the other things that we've always seen too, kind of targeted attacks on devices or machines, or sort of more complicated scenarios where they get in, they steal intellectual property, they get out. Some overseas company develops the drug faster because they stole all your R&D. All that kind of intellectual property theft, that's still a thing too. That tends to happen to more bigger companies though than kind of smaller, but not necessarily. So.
Awesome. Paul, can you speak a little bit to what you're seeing in your space that you guys are working in, as far as things that are real world things that are happening in our region, or maybe with your clients and things like that?
Yeah. This came pretty close to home for us because we had a few situations, but mostly from the phishing kinds of emails. That's the big thing that we see on a regular basis. And but just a couple of things that really got me fired up about security over the last few years, because I kind of was ignoring it, and I think more like, hey, just forget about it, it's okay. But I started hearing about things in my network. One was a local nonprofit, about 35 people. They had their server hacked and held for ransom. And they're about maybe $1 million in business for a year. And I was just shaking my head, like, why would people go after that? But I started thinking about that, and it's like, it's about volume, not about size. So if you're here thinking that because you're small you don't need to worry about it, that's the thing that's not right. That's not true. And so that was like the first thing that got me, one of the first things that got me thinking about it. And then we had an incident where somebody's contact list got hacked at our place. And at first you think, well, that's not a big deal, but what happened was that got sent to then the client. A phishing email got sent from our place to a client. Fortunately, we were able to tie this off very quickly, but it was what I call a shot across the bow. It was like a wake-up call. So if you've had a wake-up call, man, wake up, because it's real. And there are a number of other incidents, like iTunes cards, somebody getting an email and saying, hey, I need iTunes cards, just simple things. So we haven't had anything major, but it was enough to kind of tip me off. And from there, I would just say, and we still have a lot of phishing attacks now. That's primarily what we see, and we have some dark web monitoring in place. We once in a while see some things there, but primarily it's the phishing emails. And I'll just say one last thing there. To me, it's like the iceberg. I can't see everything that's out there, but you kind of read the news, and then you see these phishing emails, and if you're getting phishing emails, to me, there's a lot more under the surface going on than what you think. So take it seriously.
Yeah, we do a lot of phishing campaigns internally, and you'd be surprised about the amount of people that click on the email, enter their credentials. There's a lot of reporting on the back end, and we work for a security company, so it's unreal the amount of phishing attacks that are happening. Brute force attacks as well. Remote desktop is a really big use case for a lot of my partners. So that's what they go for, that low-hanging fruit for Windows Logon, RDP, because they know that they're not only protecting themselves, but they're protecting all of their other customers, because there's plenty of ways to get in. And attackers are smart, they know that people are using weak passwords. Now, password managers are coming out, they're definitely being enforced, but you have to be wary of that,
So we have all kinds of different tools. I've heard all kinds of tools rattled off, right? And so many customers have some, all, of these various tools, right? Things we put in place to safeguard. But let's talk a little bit to the point about why a shift in mindset and culture is so important. Because I heard a lot of cases up here where I'm guessing that security mindedness, if it had been more built into the culture, maybe would have assisted in preventing some of these things. So maybe Jared, can you start off with why do you see the idea that building kind of a security culture and building that into our cultures, why is that so critical?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think you do want to measure that, just like you measure in other security testing. Because like you're saying, there's a lot of products, they're all set up maybe, things still fall through the cracks. The same thing with people. A lot of us know about this. We know we shouldn't click on suspicious links or put our user and password and stuff. But a lot of times you just haven't seen all the scenarios, and maybe you haven't had targeted phishing done as a proactive security measure against your organization. Things that can be done to help people see this and go, oh, I see with that. I didn't know how that would have worked. Now I've seen it. So that's one of the things you can do to build in culture, and I think there's a lot more along that line. Some people have this carrot or stick mentality. Some companies are like stick, like you clicked, one more click and you're fired, sort of, I don't believe in that myself. I think you do a lot better to use a carrot, where people are like, hey, I just saw something, it looked a little suspicious, I took it to my IT person, they looked into it, it was no big deal, whatever. You go back, have that IT person, email them, CC their manager, and be like, hey, that was great. We just saw, your employee just let me know, I looked into it, wasn't a big deal in this case, but like the fact that they're doing this is great. Kind of give them a high five, maybe you give them a $10 Panera gift card or whatever, something to kind of build that culture in. I think it's really important. You can do that in every part of your business, whether you're working with developers or IT people or whatever type of employees. There's different ways that you can begin to build that security first culture into what you're engineering, what you're designing, just the processes you operate in.
Awesome. Now, Jason, you have to, I'm sure you're in the C-suite with folks who are in a pretty unhappy situation sometimes, and so you're seeing a lot of things that are really happening in our region. And so, same thing, again, how many cases have you seen where had the culture of the company, had the mindset already been shifted towards awareness, towards security throughout the organization, where that would have potentially either mitigated or prevented some situations that got all the way to you essentially.
Well, that's right. I get the terrible phone call. Sometimes it's late at night. Sometimes it's early in the morning. It says, Jason, I never want to call you about this, but we just experienced, for instance, just around the corner, there was one of our clients had a social engineering attack where someone called the CFO of very well-educated CFO, and posed to be a representative from a local bank. And that local bank had the company's entire payroll sitting in it, and they would put about $280,000, $290,000 into this account to pay paychecks. And then every 2 weeks, it would get swept, and the paychecks would go out to the employees. Well, this representative called and convinced the CFO to reset his account with the bank right there on the phone, right there at his computer. And then, of course, that $290,000 was swept out of the account within just minutes. And, you know, that kind of thing was almost devastating to that company. If you can imagine, you've got 30, 40 employees, they're all waiting for their paycheck. It's November, it's around Thanksgiving, and it's not there. And so, you know, what do you do? So we deal with a number of these, to your point, Paul, a number of these attacks for small and medium-sized businesses can be just entirely devastating. And so if this company, if this individual would have, you know, been a part of a security-first culture, I think the CFO would have probably reached out to us or to their insurance broker a couple years ago and said, hey, I need cyber risk insurance. I don't know what it looks like, I don't know exactly what I get, but guess what? I've got fire insurance, and you know, how many people in this room, their business had a fire attack? Now, how many people in this room has their business experienced like a phishing attack? Right. And so what we find over and over again is all my clients have fire insurance, but they've never had a fire in the 40 years that they've been around, 50 years that they've been around. They're $75 million company. But guess what? They've had like 10 attacks. In fact, they had a ransomware attack just in the last 3 months, and they were able to have a backup restored, and so it didn't matter that much. But guess what? This time, payroll's gone. And so, you know, starting from the C-suite and saying, okay, we need to get our mitigation, because it's going to happen to you. I mean, I can guarantee it. It's going to happen to your company. We need to get our mitigation in place. We need to call Worksighted. We need to call VDA Labs and get our tech all dialed in, right? And that's something they can help you with. Then you need to call your insurance company and get your insurance all dialed in. And then you need to call your risk mitigation person, like a Miller Johnson, and figure out, okay, how do we approach this from an organizational standpoint such that if payroll is swept by an unauthorized person, can we get immediate recovery for that? You know, what do we do? And then, you know, the simple thing is that the CFO would have had a little bit of zero trust, right, as we've talked about. Maybe they would have hung up the phone, you know, maybe called her back, called this representative back, hung up the phone, maybe talked to the controller, right? I mean, we say that over and over again. The lowest tech solution sometimes is hanging up the phone or picking up the phone and talking to a human being that you know. So
I think that's really interesting. You know, in the case you gave of CFO getting a call and doing something, there is no tool that you're going to put in place that would have prevented that. But it's the old trust but verify, right? You're my bank, you say you're my bank, I trust you, but I'm going to verify. And that's kind of it's a cultural change. It's a mindset change that it's okay to not necessarily believe what you're hearing, right? And verify that what you're telling me is actually true, right? And so, you know, again, I think there's some things there that, like you said, it's really the lowest tech solution, right? It's a mindset that we have to build into our culture to make sure that people are kind of trust but verify. Which leads me to a question, Carolyn, you used the phrase earlier, zero trust. You want to start us off with, you know, can you explain what zero trust is to start off with this? I want to talk a little bit about how that concept kind of affects our employees and culture and things like that.
Yeah, zero trust is not a product. It's definitely a vision. So it's about consistency. We don't know where the user's coming from, you know, what device they're using. So we want to verify that the user says or is who they say they are, and that they're using a trusted device. So a lot of companies are enforcing, you know, BYOD, for example, and creating policies to ensure that that happens. So access control policies are important here as well, and it really comes down to management. You know, the vision should be bottom down. I like to use the example, I mean, I don't have kids, but I know it was definitely a handful for my mom. You know, I try to put my hands in electrical outlets all the time, so you want to block the outlet altogether, right? Just take the preventative approach. You can trust your users to not know to put their hands in there, but they're just kids, right? So you have to be that trusted advisor. You have to enforce the trust and incorporate a checkpoint at every single access.
Jared, can you expand a little bit on, as kind of a framework, you know, kind of like what's the definition of zero trust when here? What does it mean?
Sure, yeah. So zero trust is this concept of, instead of just building the traditional castle, wall, you know, solid front door, solid back door, but everybody inside the company is sort of trusted, it's basically identity access management on each user is sort of the zero trust model. And I think it's particularly important for technology to do this. There's no reason technology should trust each other, right? If somebody's logging into a bank from a phone, the system that runs the bank and the system that runs the phone, they're not human. They don't have this implicit trust thing that humans do. So for humans, we can kind of look at somebody, we can read their nonverbal, and we can go, I kind of trust this person, right? And that's a good thing. You want to have trust among humans. But for technology, there shouldn't be any concept really of like, oh, you're just on the network, so you have access to like every share on the network or something like. We still see way too many companies set up like that. We call it, hard and crusty outside, soft and squishy in the middle kind of situation where if a hacker, all they do is got to send one malicious attachment, they're inside a network, and then they get to every other piece of the network. That's not good. That's failing the sort of zero trust concept.
So, follow-up question for you on that, and I'd like to hear from some others on this, and this is one I threw out at the last minute. It's interesting because the zero trust security framework, we're talking about how do we change the culture of our companies to be more security first, but the big trend in corporate culture, and I talk on this myself, is trust, right? We need to increase trust, and if we want to see rise in employee engagement, we want to see rise in performance, we want to make managing employees easier, et cetera, we need to base our organizations on trust. So the trend in corporate culture is once I bring you in, right, and you align to our values and principles and all these things, I'm gonna give you trust, right, to go do your job and execute, which is kind of the old paradigm of network security, right? Like once you get through the gate, you're good to go, and I don't need to look at you anymore. You're safe. But now we're saying that the trend in security is to go to zero trust. So are those two things where modern corporate culture is going and where network security is going over here, and we're saying that we need to shift our mindset and figure out how to have culture drive security? Are they at odds with each other or not?
Want me to start that?
Go for it.
Okay, sure. So that is a complicated question. Like I said, as humans, we do want to be able to trust each other. They trust, like many business owners, they won't do business with a business that they don't know, that they don't trust. I mean, so trust is really important in our society. I don't think we want to lose that. I don't think we want to get to a point where everybody's paranoid, everybody walks around, nobody will shake anybody's hand, nobody will talk to anybody they don't already explicitly know and trust. I mean, I don't think that's the kind of world I want to live in or I want my kids to grow up in. So I don't think security should be the department of paranoia. I just feel like that's bad for society, and I think we need to be conscious of that when we're out here talking about stuff. Balance that though, particularly like I said with machines, that they don't need that, right? There's no social human thing there, so they shouldn't trust each other. So I think that's fine to have an identity access management that manages and logs in every user device, because so many people work remote. There's no idea of just this firewall around our network and then everybody's safe inside. That concept is gone with cloud and everything. So we do want zero trust in terms of that. We also want the logging that comes with identity access management control. So every time a user is working remote and they come in and they change the books and they add something if they're an account or whatever, we want to be able to log that. We want to be able to go back and have an audit trail for that. That's all good. I think we generally want every part of that. That can, though, I will say that there is a little bit of privacy concern, and that's something I think as society will have to balance as we do, as security gets better and logging gets better. better, and tracking is better, and having every device constantly connected and checking in and being logged by your corporate situation. People are generally a little bit uncomfortable with being tracked about everything that they ever do throughout their workday, and so that whole situation could potentially make people paranoid. So I think there's a privacy issue that eventually we're going to have to think about and address a little bit, but that's a little bit separate from the question you asked.
What do you think, Paul? Twisting, I think, has a unique and special culture. And so how do these, and you talked about some of the security challenges you guys have had, how does this idea of, kind of zero trust but verify, do you think that's at odds with, for example, your organization, your culture, and where you want to go with your culture? And I think you guys have a culture of high trust, right? So are those at odds?
Yeah, we do have a very high level of personal trust, and I like what Jared's saying though about it, the technology is complex, and it's not like we don't trust the people, but we're humans and we're flawed. So sometimes we have to protect ourselves against ourselves, and we have to protect ourselves against the hackers and coming through the technology. So the technology, we need to be careful how we use that as a tool. But that doesn't, to me, imply that we don't trust you as individuals, and give you a lot of free reign to do your work, right? So, but I think I can see the delicate challenge, between those two. And I'll just be transparent, because the zero trust idea is a bit new to me even today. And that's why I was planning to come here. So I registered, and then I found out I was going to be a panelist. So I'm getting to learn firsthand with all of you, and it's great. But no, I think that we often talk about it as like technology is something that we all know has inherent risks and challenges, and we need to protect ourselves in terms of how we deal with it. But separating that from the personal trust that we have in the team. And we're always going to err on the side of the team. I know we're going to do that. So as an IT director, I have to be thinking about how do I make zero trust and technology invisible? Because that's the goal. To me, our team does not want to see technology. We do not want that. Productivity and security are two high priorities, and they're kind of at odds in the same sense, right? So we can never let security get in the way. Neither can we allow that kind of thinking to allow a security breach to happen and say, oh, well, we put productivity first, right? There's got to be both and.
Awesome. Thanks for those answers. You want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they commingle for sure. Like you were saying, making things easier for the end user, it should be completely transparent, right? The workflow shouldn't be impacted. Maybe they have a single sign-on portal and they're using a password manager and they're just click 2FA to their phone, approve. So as long as the workflow and you're thinking of the user, I think that's a sense of creating trust for them. And also it comes down to explaining why, right? I think their communication and explaining why these things are happening. Hypergrowth is great, but there has to be certain checkpoints along the way. If not, things are going to backfire. And I think people understand that and they'll be completely okay because you're also securing them. So it's not just about you in that case.
So it's kind of about this, it's not that we don't trust you, right? But we're trying to keep you safe. We're keeping the organization safe, right? And in some ways, like that's what they trust you as leaders to do within your company, right? So thinking along that lines of things that are changing in an effort to kind of keep us safe and things like that. Jason, can you speak a little bit to what kind of legislation and changes that you're seeing even now or coming down the pipe in the future?
Well, that's great. Great question, because I was just thinking the same thing. In this, the way we approach it at Miller Johnson is we think that, through the proper policies and procedures, through the proper insurance, through the proper tech stack, through the proper culture, you're creating the infrastructure, you're creating the base for which trust can happen, right? So if you've gone through a vendor management program and you've looked at all your vendors and say, okay, how can I tighten these contracts up to protect me in the event of a dispute? If you've gone through all these different things, you can create this trust environment. Well, what the legislature has determined in the state of Michigan and a lot of other states is that they're not going to just wait for you to do all this, right? They're not just going to wait for the companies to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to raise my hand. We are going to adopt all of these risk mitigation procedures and policies and things. So in Michigan, there's a new law. It was signed by Governor Schneider in January 20th, 2019. Goes into effect at the end of this year. It applies to all entities that are registered with the Department of Insurance and Financial Services. And it's a new cybersecurity law. And it looks like about 13 other laws that have already passed around the country. And it looks like the new California law. It looks a little bit like the European law, if you've heard of GDPR. And it's all structured the same. All this legislation is structured the same. And what it does is it says, we're not going to wait for companies to do this stuff. You have to do it. So section like 556 is creating an information security program at your company. And what does an information security program look like? I almost brought the bill with me. In fact, I asked Mark to print it out for me yesterday, and I gave it away to another client before I could bring it here. There's like 30 requirements in this bill. And if I had a PowerPoint, we would go through each one of them because that would be so much fun, right? And it's literally what I've been talking about. It's, do you have policies and procedures? Do we have a password policy? Did you hire Duo to do two-factor authentication? In fact, that's becoming what's called reasonable security measures under these laws. And that's what these laws do. They don't say you have to use Duo or you have to use VDA or you have to have a firewall. All of them say you have to have reasonable technical, administrative, and physical security measures in place to protect your company. And so, you know, starting January 1st, 2021, wow, that seems like the future. That seems like Blade Runner, you know, like it's never going to be here. But, you know, starting at that point, every entity in the state, and there's a lot of them, right? There's a ton of them that are registered with this, have to have an information security program. They're going to have to report data breaches to the government within 10 days, to DIFs within 10 days. On an annual basis, they're going to have to certify to DIFs that they have this information security program, that they're running the training. I know Worksighted, you know, works with Novafor and some others to do these phishing trainings, and with VDA, there's phishing trainings. And, you know, you're going to have to start doing these things to comply. And so what we're seeing in Michigan is the ratcheting up. And I would say if, you know, California is leading the game, and I think where California goes, the rest of the country is going to go. And, you know, where California has went is to say, okay, we are going to require not only all of these risk mitigation strategies, but if you collect this data of personal information, that includes employees, right? So this applies to every company in here. It's not just your web-based company that collects consumer information or they swipe cards. Every company that has personal data, you know, is going to need to give rights to these data subjects, they're called. And they're really simple rights. In fact, I think most companies here, if they have a website privacy policy, will say something to the effect of, you know, we're going to treat your personal information, we're going to protect it, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And if you don't do it, now attorney generals are going to start carrying. And California is also giving rights to individuals. Michigan's not gone that far. But that's where everything's headed. So at this point, you know, we've got probably 10% of our clients that are affected by a lot of these different laws. Michigan's coming down the pike. I mean, Michigan already has its Identity Theft Protection Act, which is your typical data breach response act. You know, if you have a data breach, you got to send out notices to the affected individuals, that kind of thing. But where everything's headed is to this culture of security. So the fact that Worksighted thought this is the time to start talking about this is very prescient. It's brilliant because what the legislature's decided is now it's time. It's just time. And Michigan is almost there. So you might as well get ready and get there ahead of the game.
So when we think about you know, the C-suite, the leadership in your organizations, they're hearing and thinking about some of these bigger changes maybe that they're hearing coming down the pipe. And I'm sure many of you that are responsible for these things, you have leadership saying to you, well, we need to be secure, right? We need to be secure. And it kind of leaves you in a position of, well, where do we start? So Yeah, and I'm open to whoever wants to feel that. You know, I think it's a very practical question for those that are tasked with the responsibility of starting to move the organizations in the direction of security. Like, where do you start?
I could say a couple of quick words on that. I think it's basically a risk situation, right? So if being down for a day costs your company X million dollars, or depending on the size of your company, right? If being offline or losing your data, if having a potential customer situation by having to report that you've been breached affects your ability to then win new business with customers, or that costs you Z. So you could basically just do this risk formula and figure out if we experience a major breach, it's going to cost us this much. Then, you know, protecting your company data it's worth spending this much, less than that, right? We don't want to spend more than what you would lose or protecting, right? So that's the sort of appropriate cost. The business case basically for security is a pretty simple business case to make, which is if we spend this much now, we'll save this much by doing it ahead of time.
I'll take a crack at that because I've had to start, and I just would say start small, and then don't stop. Like, just, you gotta keep working on it. And my philosophy is, and I think everything we're saying here is, security's not going away. I think we used to think we could build a wall big enough and just mortar it up and we'd be all good. Okay, that's not gonna happen because you're gonna have to, because the cyber criminals keep building ladders that can get over that wall. So you have to keep building a layer. So get started, I think, is the biggest key. And for us, I just really have like 4 sort of key things. I like to use this house metaphor, and you got to start at the front door. Get the front door locked and get it bolted shut. That's all of your hardware and infrastructure, all of the really fundamental security things in place that are pretty much on the digital and virtual level. And then you got to make your people aware of the back door, because you know when you think about locking down your house, you think, I'm going to make sure the front door is locked, but we don't often think about that back door. And the back door is where our friends come, and that's those phishing emails. And so you've got to think about how to handle the back door, and that is about getting things like know before and getting your team aware. It's like just a great example for us is Worksighted got us going on know before, and we did a training, and I'm telling you what, I can't believe the difference in our culture of people that are, you know, being very aware of phishing emails. And then we created this little fish alert button in Outlook, and people love doing that. It's like a little game. See if did I get the know before thing, right? So that, you can talk about incentives. That's a little bit of like the carrot. We're not like incentivizing it a lot, but we could even more. So that's the back door. And then you got to have a safety net. So it's not a matter, I think we said this earlier, but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So get your cybersecurity policy in place. Work with somebody like, Jason to figure out what that needs to be, but you got to get that in place. And then lastly, I would just say keep putting layers on. And for me right now, that's the policy part of this. Just keep that working and just keep going. So start small and just, you know, get the front door, the back door, the safety net, and then just keep plugging away at it.
And the point on the safety net, you know, making sure you're doing the basics is really important, because a lot of the time your safety net won't catch you if you haven't done the basics, right? It won't even come into play because they'll say, sorry, you didn't do the basics, so you know you can't call in and make a claim on this or something like that. So the basics are really, really important. Carolyn?
Yeah, definitely find a trusted advisor. A lot of companies may have the power to do it on their own, but at the end of the day, things are always changing. It's not as simple as you think. So go to an expert that you can trust with a plan, of course, but they're there to guide you in the right direction. There's things that are changing, there's new laws that are coming every day. So definitely reach out to them and full on trust with what they're recommending. Of course, I think keeping it simple is always the best way, and just think of checking the boxes in the most simple way and consolidating different tools into one. So for MFA, for example, that will get rid of weak passwords. You know, if there's a user that's using weak passwords and the credentials are out there, You can use a dark web monitoring tool to figure out that yes, it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Your credentials are already out there. You can see that with pretty much any dark web monitoring tool. So if you have MFA in place, then if that hacker has your credentials and they're trying to access those critical applications, it's gonna be a no-go. So just keep it simple, know what your most critical applications are, and then trust your advisor.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so I want to keep us on time. We've got some questions that have came in from the audience, from text. And so I'm just going to throw some of these out there. Nobody's prepared for these, so we'll just see how this goes. Are user-caused or user-initiated security breaches the fault of the user, or are they a management and policy failure?
I can take a quick stab if you want. Take a fast stab at that. I think it's generally both. I didn't do it. It could be that somebody clicked on something, or they put in their user and pass, or they're clearly not doing the right thing. That's possible. That happens in a lot of, the whole security testing and getting a trusted advisor. I totally agree with that. I mean, people go to a dentist to do, you don't try to do your own teeth work. You probably should have somebody that's an expert look at some of this stuff and kind of help advise you through some of these situations. But I'll balance that by saying, yeah, maybe it's partly the user's fault, but on the other hand, should one user and one bad click take down your whole company? Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on any one person in your company, right? I don't think that's fair to users to say that. So I do think you need a defense in depth strategy. You need good backups, you need logging, you need resiliency, you need all these things. So if they do click and the malware gets on the endpoint and it starts to spread across the enterprise, that should be detected by your other defenses, and you should have tested for that. You should be, sort of know what lateral movement looks like in your organization, that kind of stuff, so that you're not just like, hey, this one user just ruined our $50 million company or whatever. That's ridiculous. So I don't think that's fair. I hear a lot of people saying that you can't fix known users, or I just don't. I think there's a balance there. That's the right answer. Maybe we should not use this mic.
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. Anyone else want to add to that, or I got some more? I got a whole pile coming in. When it comes to writing policy, is there a good resource, either website or whatever, to craft some basic boilerplate policies? Maybe when your organization, and I think this doesn't have ready access to lawyers.
I'll just take a quick crack at that, because that's the situation I was in, and I used her advice, and I went to Worksighted and found a person that could craft one. I would just say one click better. Worksighted's got a team of people that know this space, and we're able to craft us a policy. And while it wasn't perfect, it's formed a basis and given us a lot of clarity for where we're going with policy. And it's comprehensive and it's in depth. So I think that was a really great way to move forward, and it was very economical.
Great. Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of policies out there that you can enforce. Geo-blocking, out-of-date software, the list goes on and on. Jailbroken devices, not having a passcode on your phone, but it's about taking a look at all the endpoints that are accessing your applications and understanding the security posture of your endpoints and where your gaps are. And again, I do suggest working with that trusted advisor, because they will take care of the policies for you based on the weak points, if you will. Not like saying weak points, but just points where you can improve. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Can you speak to the GLBA law's implications versus the coming Michigan law? I'm assuming that means to say GDPR.
Well, there's the Graham Leach Blighter
Oh,
which is
that's
a
right,
private
gotcha.
subject as well.
That's why I'm not.
So if there's a
Hey,
GLBA, is there a GLBA person in here who's at a bank and the Graham Leach Blighter? Here we go. Yeah, so, the GLBA, well, let me speak to policies and procedures real quick. So, policies and procedures come in all shapes and sizes and forms, and I've seen them all. I've drafted a lot of them. you just need to be careful, right, that, you know, you have such thing as like IT security policies and procedures, bring your own device, those sorts of things. And then you've got policies and procedures that need to comply with the law. So make sure that when you do, because there's places you can go on the web, Worksighted has policies and procedures. Make sure when you get it, make sure it's the right type for you. Because if you are a bank, if you are a community financial institution, you may be subject to like the GLBA or some other type of law, and well, and the new DIFS law. And your policies and procedures need to comply with those. So just be careful about that. The second thing, to address directly the question as to how you could compare the new DIFS law with GLBA, is that, you know, the one glaring thing that I see that's different is just the data breach response responsibilities. So I've advised, you know, a number of banks, smaller banks, on okay, we had, for instance, we had an employee that right before they left downloaded a giant spreadsheet full of all of our clients. And that spreadsheet went into our thumb drive, and our DLP, our data loss prevention software, didn't catch it somehow, some way. So there's the thumb drive with all the clients' information goes out the door. So what do we got to do? We got to notify people or whatever. And if you look at the GLBA, its notification obligations, in my mind, are not fantastic, right? They're about as mushy as you get. Now, I have a job because laws are mushy. I get it. But the point there is, you know, I think the new DIFS law, you know, with this 10-day notice obligation, it just kind of turns the screws, right? And in fact, like Florida went to like a 30-day notice obligation. So if you have a security incident, you have to notify people. You got to do it within 30 days. And that doesn't sound like a long time until you think about the way this stuff works, right? So ransomware attack happens, boom, the whole company goes down. VEA comes in, boom, they help restore your company to operating, and they do it within like 3 to 4 days, maybe even faster if he's super awesome, right? And then, boom, all of a sudden you're back and running. Then you have to figure out, okay, let's look at the logs and see what actually left the building. Was it personal information that left the building? Was it financial account information? And then you got to take that and you got to map it onto all these laws and say, okay, if this is what happened, was there access or acquisition is the key words. Was there access or acquisition, and what was accessed or acquired? So is it personal information, financial account information? And then you take that and you literally map it out of the law. And then boom, you don't need a lawyer. You just figured it out. But, so I think what's happening is, with the DIFS law, with all these new laws, is they're just tightening the screws. You have to have a culture of cybersecurity. You have to have policies and procedures. You have to have employee training. And that's the big difference.
Awesome. Changing a culture can be very challenging. What are some ways you've seen to positively impact cultural changes, you know, specifically around, you know, security?
I think I would just say for us, you know, we implemented some training and awareness kinds of things. KnowBe4 was one example, but every time we sort of have a policy that we're maybe going to bring out or enforce, we try to wrap that in the right kind of context. Nothing goes to the team without some really good thinking about how's this going to impact the culture, and making sure we think about the consequences, and then make sure we roll that out in a very positive light and show that this is going to be a positive thing and what the rationale is. So that's just been a couple things we've done.
Great. Yeah, Carolyn?
You know, I say security can be complicated, so try to make it fun. We have hack days at Duo, so you know, anyone can go present a project, for example. So just listen to your employees, and there are some policies that are requirements, but do something to /maybe take a survey of how they felt, if there's any other questions that you can answer for them. Just make sure that they feel like they're being listened to. Slack channels are always fun, if you want to do security channels. So really anything to make it interactive for them and make it fun.
Just to pile on, when we did the KnowBe4 training, we made it a pizza lunch, so we had everybody together, said here's what we're going to do, and then sent everybody back, with a couple pieces of pizza, and then we came back to kind of celebrate what we learned afterwards.
Awesome. And since we're talking about security awareness training, the last question was security awareness training, and how do I make it more effective and engaging? So there's a great answer to that, and I don't know if anyone else has any experience around security awareness training and how to make that, maybe not something where, yeah, it's new in the beginning, and then after that we just ignore it.
Yeah, I think keeping it fresh and keeping it fun, like bringing in a lunch and learn speaker, you can do some of it in person, so you have some of it computer-based, could have a computer-based yearly training. I mean, a lot of companies have a yearly requirement to do cybersecurity training or security awareness training, so there's that, and then there's tools as well, automated types of tools and testing, other kinds of interesting testing that you can do, kind of make it fun. Certainly something that we've been a part of. Even like we were going back to the trusting we were talking about, like for example, somebody at the front desk, if they see somebody trying to come in without badging in or something, you don't want to be rude, you don't want to be mean to people, but on the other hand, you have a policy that says everybody needs to badge in, you can't let people tailgate through the front door, so you could maybe come up with some fun scenarios to teach people about, not just phishing, because that's a big one, but also all these other pieces of software and physical and all these other security awareness topics, come up with fun ideas.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to take a minute and thank our panelists for their time today. And again, I really want everyone to leave here with the sense that there is not one magic thing that you need to be doing in relation to security. There's a lot of tools. There's always going to be a lot of tools. There's going to be more tools. There's going to be different threats next week than there were last week than there are this week. Those things are always going to be changing. We have to stay in front of them. And the best way to do that is to build security into our culture, right? To change the mindset of the people that work for us, the leadership all the way down, to make sure that we're really trying to stay in front of and be proactive with things that are going on in security. Because we heard a lot of things today that, yes, tools are there to protect us, but in many ways we'd like to not have things happen. We don't even want to have to use the tool if we don't have to. So again, it really is a cultural change. And any time we're going to make a cultural change within our organization, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. You have to invest and be dedicated in it. So with that, thank you very much. And Ryan's going to come up, I think, and do some housekeeping for us.
I'll just yell. I don't need the mic, I guess. So just real quick, again, thanks to everyone for coming. We'll follow up with a recording of this event. If you missed something, there was information you wanted to look back on, you'll be getting that in the next few days. We do have this nice ring doorbell as a door prize for everyone who came. So you should have received a little red ticket when you came in. Why don't you guys pull that out real quick, and we'll have one of our panelists pull the winner. And if it's not you, you can blame them, not me. You want to do it? Who wants to do it? Let's have our friend from Texas. Yeah, go for it. Read it out loud.
Just to make it more visual.
Yeah.
Okay, the lucky winner is 5357600.
Right here, right on Ryan.
Pretty sure I don't know. We'll double check it. What was it?
5357,600.
You got it.
So again, thanks everyone for coming. We know you guys are probably a busy day, a lot of things to do, so if you have to take off, thanks for coming. If you want to stick around, speak with any of the presenters, or ask any questions of the Worksighted staff, feel free. We've got this place for a little while longer. So again, thanks for coming out.